All right, guys, we got to talk about hitting mats. And look, I get it. Hitting mats are certainly not the sexiest part of any home golf simulator or practice area build. But speaking from experience, I can tell you, if you overlook this, you will regret it in the long run. And look, let's be real about this. It's very easy when you're building a home golf simulator to get really wrapped up in things like the technology, the launch monitors, the projectors. We know because we've done it ourselves. And what happens is the mat becomes an afterthought, and sometimes you end up with something really flimsy like this. And here's the problem with having a bad mat. It can create some habits that you don't necessarily want to transfer out to real turf on the golf course. But perhaps the biggest problem is if you take enough shots on something like this, you can definitely end up hurting yourself. And there's actually a name for the injury. It's called turf shock. And if you've ever hit enough balls off of a bad mat, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's that pain you feel in your wrists, sometimes it's your elbows, sometimes your shoulders. Either way, it is not pleasant. Speaking of injuries, these are not exactly light.
These are heavy. Thought about lifting them, but gotta preserve the back.
Work smart.
Yeah.
All right, so you're probably wondering what's with all the boxes. Well, part of that is that there's no one right mat for everybody across the board. It really depends on a lot of things. It depends on how much you're practicing, what's your performance goals, what's your budget. There's a lot that goes into it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna test a whole bunch of different mats today. We're gonna look at their performance, their look, their feel. We're gonna even break out the launch monitor, hit a couple and see how that affects things. But ultimately, our goal is to find the right mat for us here in our build, and hopefully along the way, show you some options that you can look at and decide what might be best for you in your home, either simulator or practice setup. Oh, and let's get this out of the way right away. This is in no way a sponsor video. However, Fiberbuilt did send us all of these mats to test, but they are not reviewing the video. They have no say in the video. This is gonna be our own honest opinion on these mats. And like I said, we are gonna pick one that we're gonna use here in our office going forward.
All right, so here's what I think we should do. There's one base, so I think those are the smaller, heavier boxes. I think we set up the base, and then we're gonna take you guys through all the various different hitting mats and surfaces that we have, and we'll break them down as we open them. We'll talk about price, we'll talk about the actual material, how it feels, and all that good stuff. But I think we definitely should start building that base.
All right, so these are the rubber base. They are not light, they're about 20 pounds each. And this is gonna be universal with all the hitting mats that we're testing today. So all the mats will sit on top of this. This will be the same base, but what it does is it provides a nice stable surface. The weight helps it so it doesn't move around when you swing, because if you ever swung on a really cheap mat, you know sometimes it can twist under your feet. So we're gonna set up this base, and then from there we will start to lay the mat hitting surfaces on top of it, but this is an important component of the overall system. Ooh.
What?
Walk on this for a second. I've never felt a mat like that. Walk on that.
Ooh.
Right?
That's cool.
It's like walking on the ground. That's wild. All right, we got everything out and we're getting our bearings. We're learning as we're going here. What we're gonna have is the 3 different mats, and there will be, although they use the same rubber panels, there will be different configurations of those to support the mats, because as you may be seeing here, some of them have different hitting strips. We're gonna start with what I would call, I hesitate to call it a base model, but it's kind of the simplest one to build. We're gonna work our way up from the least expensive to probably the most expensive, but don't use, and I'm warning you of this, don't use price as the only determining factor here, because you'll see the nuances between the two. It's not just the most expensive is the best. As I mentioned earlier, it's gonna come down to what you're using it for, and you'll see why we mean that in just a second, based on the different hitting strips. It's the different types of ways that you want to hit. So let's start with the simplest one, Mike. We'll snap those panels together. It's about 8 panels, and then we'll hit a few on that mat, and then we'll move up to the next one. All right, so this one's actually really easy. Basically, you have corner pieces and you have main pieces, and they just snap together with these little rubber plugs, and then our hitting surface is gonna lay on top of it. All right, so this one took about 10 minutes max to put together. This is definitely the easiest one. And we're gonna talk about what model this is in a second, and we're gonna fire up the launch monitor, hit a few. All right, so this first one's called the Performance Turf Series. Like I said, it's the least expensive out of all of them, and the overall price depends on the size. So it comes in a bunch of different sizes. But one thing, like I said, why price is not the only thing, and it really depends on what you want, look, and feel. This is the only one out of the mats we're testing today that actually is a teeable surface. So you can tee this just anywhere, you can hit anywhere off the mat. The other thing too is, we talked about like that injury prevention. I mean, just take a quick look at how thick this is. So you got a thick rubber backing, and then it's very soft. It's almost like an ASMR here, Mike. You got this like soft, like turf feel. Now compare that, like I said, to a mat that you'd pick up on Amazon. I think you can quickly see the difference here in just how absorbing it is. So for that injury prevention, it definitely helps. And like I said, I like the fact that it's seamless if you're looking for like a real clean look, and the fact that you can tee it anywhere. So let's fire up the launch monitor and just hit a few off of it and tell you how it feels hitting both from the turf and from the tee. Firstly though, I will say the feel walking on it, it is soft. I mean, I am sinking into it, not uncomfortably in any way, but it's definitely different than any mat that I've ever hit on. I'm even thinking as a reference point, when you go to the driving range, those types of mats, this definitely has more give to it. You sink in. I think the best way to compare this is think of it as like kind of a soft fairway the day after it rains, that kind of feel. That's the feel under the feet, but there is no set hitting surface on this, so it's gonna be good lefties or righties. You can position yourself wherever. I set us in the middle here, and we set down our launch monitor. By the way, huge thanks to our friends over at Play Better. They loaned us this Foresight GC3 to do some of our tests. Make sure you guys check them out, and if you are buying a simulator, they've got a great quiz there that'll help walk you through that process. So we'll link to that in the video description. Definitely check them out. Huge thanks to them for giving us the launch monitor. And now let's hit one with the wedge. I want to see what this feels like hitting off of turf.
How'd that feel?
Felt good. So nice, definitely a nice soft feel. In fact, it's such a thick mat. I don't know if it'll translate on the camera, but Mike, you can actually see where my divot would be. You see where I pushed the grain in this direction? That just shows you how thick this mat is. So I'm just hitting a couple to see what that turf feels like, not only at the ball, but also under my feet. That's how I can compare it to the other mats when we swap them out and see what that feels like. But so far, so good. Let's see what kind of spin numbers we get on this wedge. So that's how far I hit this wedge in real life. It's about a 100-yard club for me. 8,200 spin, that seems about right. So hit a couple of wedge shots here, feels good. Definitely different than any other turf that I've experienced, and I'd say the biggest number one factor is how soft it is. It feels very soft, not just at contact, but under the feet. I'm gonna hit an iron real quick and just see how that feels. You know, guys, I'm gonna try something here. If I had maybe one complaint about this, it's that I feel like it's so soft, I'm actually not getting the type of traction that I'd wanna get. And I'm actually wondering if this is kind of such a realistic feel to real turf that for a full swing, it might be better to actually put my spikes on. Because I'm not swinging right now in true golf shoes, at least not for the course. And that's my only complaint so far. I would say if I wanted to quantify this, it's like a 10 out of 10 on softness. I've never actually stood on a mat that was quite this soft and in just giving. So I feel like having a little bit of grip like you would on the golf course might change that. So let me hit one with this and see if that makes a difference. So now, like I said before, you get a tee, you can kind of use it however you want. I could tee it in pretty deep. I personally tee the ball high, so it feels nice and sturdy there. Actually, I usually tee it even higher than that. So let's tee it up like I would on the golf course. And okay, now I feel like
now you got the stability.
But it's so soft. I felt like I needed something. All right, driver swing felt good. One thing I'll say is I'm gonna rate this one as super, super soft, right? I've not felt anything in a mat like this before. If anything, it feels the most like a soft outdoor turf, like I said, maybe after a day of rain is what it feels like. Now, we're gonna move in and hit the next one. And like I said, there's no right answer for everybody. It really depends on what you want. The next one has a different hitting surface, and it also is the one that is perhaps I would say the most forgiving when it comes to injury prevention. So let's get that one set up. We're gonna have to rearrange the base just a bit, and we're gonna hit the next one, and now we'll start to be able to compare verbally what we think the feel difference is between the different mat options. All right, so this one's called the Fiber Built Grass Series, and you'll see why here. Pretty obvious. You've got what looks like grass, and this is where we're actually gonna hit. Okay, that just pops in, and then let's grab our standing surface. One thing to note is where you stand is exactly the same as that Performance Series mat that we just hit off of. So you can place a tee in this, it's exactly the same. It's gonna be the same feel under feet. This is where you're gonna stand, but you don't necessarily hit off of this. All right, so the reason why they claim that this one is the best when it comes to that turf shock, that injury prevention, is the center strip where you're gonna be hitting. Here now we have a full 1.5 inch, it looks like, of actual grass. And this feels a little bit different. You can see it visibly looks a little bit different than that performance turf we were hitting off of. And the idea here is that you can hit down and through, and even on a more powerful strike, you're never gonna quite get all the way down to that rubber beneath it. So that's where it gives kind of the best give, and it helps the most with things like wrist, elbow, shoulder prevention. So you can hit off of this. Now, one thing I'll say is this is not designed to put a tee in. So there are built-in tees in it where you can put your tee. This feels a little bit more like perhaps a grown-in fairway is the best way to describe it. But here's where you're gonna have, if you're putting a lot of reps in, like I said, this has a 300,000 shot guarantee. If you're putting a lot of reps in, you're worried about injury, you probably wanna be taking them off of this grass-like surface. So let's set up the GC3 again and just hit a few and see what the feel difference is. All right, so we got our wedge in hand again. Like I said, same exact surface that I'm standing on, and I would recommend wearing spikes. There's that much give to it. However, we do have a different surface here now. This is more of a grass type of feel. So we're gonna hit a wedge off of it and see how that goes. Oh, wow. No mat sound at all. Did you hear that, Mike?
Nothing, clean.
So that's a great wedge strike for me, just like we saw with the last mat. But I think if you really listening closely, you'll see the difference. In fact, I've got them next to each other, so let me just hit here. Listen to the sound if I hit off of the performance mat versus the grass. Ready? So two totally different sounds there. You can see what I mean. Different feel. Like I said, if your primary goal is injury prevention, this is definitely one you want to look at. I'm not going to hit driver here because it won't make any difference being on a tee. Like I said, it's just the stance, which is exactly the same as the last one we tested. But I do want to hit that mid iron again, just to see how that feels in this grass. All right, I pulled it a little bit, but what I would say, if again, I'm trying to kind of describe it and quantify it in some way, what I would say is hitting off of this fiber-built grass would be the least matte feel that I've ever had. This feels the most like real grass. Again, nice and soft hitting off of this, but you can see just kind of like swinging like this, how I can get a little bit down and into that rubber. I can get a little bit of a bounce. You can kind of see that if I hit down and chunk behind it. If we do that on the grass over here, you know, less bounce, more into the grass, more of a feel like grass than you get here. You can almost, I can feel that a little bit and hear it, that little bounce. Here we get more of a sweep through the grass. So definitely less strain on the elbow and definitely a softer feel. So that's one you want to look at if injury prevention is your number one thing and you kind of like a little bit more of a grassy feel. The only thing you do lose out on is that you can't tee it up. So give and take, we've got one more. It's kind of like the Cadillac of all of these mats. It's the most expensive, but it's got a ton of features, so we definitely want to show you guys that one. So next, we're going to take a look at what's called the player preferred. And the big difference here, we're also going to show you where we stand in the stand areas, but the big difference is this hitting panel that's going to go in the center. It's 2 feet wide, so it's going to make this whole thing a little bit wider. We're going to go out to 10 by 4, and this, it's heavy. Be careful.
Yes.
You want help?
No, look at that. I want to test it. Yeah, that's heavy.
Wow. What would you estimate that weighs?
70 plus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's every bit. It is heavy. That's where the technology is in this. So they claim that this is the most accurate representation of real fairway turf. So if you are very serious about game improvement and also really hyper accuracy when it compares to what hitting your mat will feel like transitioning to hitting on a fairway, they say this is the one. So we're going to get this snapped together now, and we'll show you a little more of those features. All right, so this is really where the tech happens. This is in this hitting panel. So they claim that it absorbs, kind of funny how accurate this is, but they say 94.7% of a club's impact is absorbed by this. So again, injury prevention, things like that. What it is, and I can't take this one apart to show you, but I can show you that altogether it's about 1.5 inches thick. What it is it's a rubber backing. Inside there, they've got what's called like a vibration absorption layer. And then on top, they have their most premium, most accurate representation of fairway turf. So the absorption layer really just fits into this center panel that's 2 feet wide. And then on the sides, we've got what's basically the topper of that to match. That's that fairway. You can see it's a little thinner because this is just for standing. It is not for hitting. And the difference is you don't have that absorption layer and the kind of more expensive components you have in the center. So these are just going to kind of sit like the other ones did on the sides, and you get a nice seamless look of the same depth. This one will not take a tee. The way that this is built, you can't get a tee into it, but it's got multiple spots where they have built-in tees that you can hit off of. So let's hit a few and see how it feels. All right, first things first, stepping on it. Still soft, right? If the other one was a 10 in softness, I would say this is about a 6. Still soft, right? But not nearly as much give or sink as I had standing in the last mats. So a little bit firmer. As far as the hitting area, you can hit anywhere in this hitting panel. And similarly, like, I mean, it's different. It's not like that grass. It's somewhere in between what we have with the performance turf and the grass, right? So it's got soft, you can see how it's kind of just brushing here. There's a little bit, just a little bit of bounce when I really kind of dig in, but overall, it's got a good amount of give to it. It's got a nice sound, the brush. We'll compare that sound too in a second. We'll get a microphone down there, but let's hit a wedge shot and see how this feels. Wow. I have not felt a mat like that before. That felt like hitting off of a fairway. I might have to have you hit one of these, Mike, just to feel this. It's unique. And again, this is not taking anything away from the other two. Again, it's going to come down to really your personal preference, what types of turf you hit off of. But this feels like the fairways we're used to hitting off of, especially here in the Northeast. Let me hit one more. Oh, wow. Wow, that feels realistic. I think the only thing that's missing is a divot.
Enter Mike. Enter Mike for that.
Yeah, you know what? Hit one. Mike tends to be steeper than I am. I want to see, how does that feel when you hit one? You want to hit my club?
I'll be honest with you. After, I'm not lying, I'm not making this up. After our sim sessions in here, at night in bed, I will feel pain in my left shoulder. Always.
Yeah.
So that's because I am steep.
That's that turf shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. Oh.
Right?
That's like coming off the top of butter. Woo!
It's not
That's
something
unique.
I've felt from a mat before.
Yeah, that's really unique.
Let me do this. Let me do one more thing. So like I said, I think a lot of part of feel sometimes is sound. I'm going to put my mic down there again, and we're going to compare the sound of this one on a wedge strike. I'm going to grab that same mid-iron, and then I want to give you some additional thoughts on this. So for me, first and foremost, it's not, again, it's very subjective. I don't want to steer you guys in one direction or the other. I want to just kind of explain it and let you decide what you're most comfortable with. I kind of like a little more firmness in where I'm standing. It's still very realistic to where I would still wear the spikes standing on this. The other mats were a little bit more give. Maybe it's just that I'm used to, but depends on the conditions you play in. If you play in really soft conditions, you might want to look at that. So far, this one's the leader in the clubhouse for me. So like I said, if there's any con for me here, it's just the fact that you can't put a tee in it. I love that from the Performance Series, that I was able to tee it anywhere I want. I can get my tee height just right. Here, we do have built-in tees though. I do tee it high when I drive it, so you've got an adjustable tee we can work with. But just for taking the strikes off the turf, so far this one's got the best feel for me. Love the way it feels striking down and into the turf. All right, so price, we got to talk about that, of course. The mats that we tested today, based on the size that we tested today, range from about $900 to $1,600, this being the $1,600 option in the 4x10. However, there are a number of different sizes. So if you do want, per se, the performance of the player preferred, you can get a smaller size if you want to save a little bit on money. Most important takeaway here, though, is I think the mistake that so many of us make, we buy a golf simulator or a packaged golf simulator, and we end up, like I said before, with something like this. And now seeing that direct comparison, you see how much of a difference that can really make. If you hear that? So hitting something like this all day, every day, that's when you start to have the injuries. That's when you start to have the results that don't translate to the golf course. So if nothing else, we want to bring awareness to it that maybe you're building a sim for the first time. Maybe you're upgrading your sim. Maybe you already have an existing mat and you're just looking to upgrade. The nice thing about this being modular, you can add it at another time. I think ultimately, Mike, we're gonna hit a few more after the fact and really grind it out, but I think this is the one we're gonna end up with here. For our build, this player preferred really feels terrific, but let us know your questions or comments below. Regardless though, definitely don't overlook the importance of your mat, and if you are starting to feel a little bit of pain in those hands, wrists, arms, shoulders, elbows, there's a good chance it could be from that turf shock. So be smart about your mat choices, and you'll definitely benefit from it. Make sure you subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.